Attacking safeguarded nuclear facilities is a violation of Article 2 of the UN Charter. It's a violation of Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention. It is a violation of resolutions and decisions of the IAEA Board of Governors and General Conference. Only the UN Secretary General condemned the bombings. Otherwise, people have not condemned the bombing, which is in contrast to the Russian attacks on Ukrainian nuclear facilities. That if Israel were to disarm its nuclear capability, peace would follow, then recognition would come, and there could be a zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. Recently, the so-called Abraham Accords under President Trump's first administration, where countries like Bahrain, Qatar normalized relations with Israel, they also did not insist on denuclearizing Israel's nuclear weapons.
Hello and welcome to Chaos Knowledge. I'm your host, Afeera Firdous. Today, the focus of our discussion will be on conflict in the Middle East and its implications for the future of International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. We are joined by Dr. Tariq Rauf, truly a best person to talk to when it comes to the future of IAEA. Dr. Tariq is the former head of Verification and Security Policy Coordination Office at the IAEA. And he dealt with high-priority verification cases, including Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, South Korea, and North Korea. Thank you, Dr. Tariq, for joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So to start our conversation, can you please explain how does the verification mechanisms at the IAEA really work?
So the International Atomic Energy Agency was established in 1957 as a result of a notable speech given at the UN General Assembly by then US President Dwight Eisenhower. So this is at the very beginning of the nuclear age, which started in July 1945. So the challenge was to make available the peaceful uses of nuclear energy and to prevent its use for new countries developing nuclear weapons. So the IAEA was given this dual mandate to assist countries in using nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. This is generation of electricity, human health, water purification, and so on, and at the same time to ensure that states did not develop nuclear weapons. So it's a function, two functions rolled into one. Now, the verification system of the IAEA really took off in 1970 when the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty entered into force. And very briefly, all non-nuclear weapon states that become party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, are obligated to place all of their nuclear material and all of their nuclear activities under IAEA verification. Now, countries such as Pakistan, for example, which never joined the Non-Proliferation Treaty, nonetheless, all of the power reactors in Pakistan, including Khanuk 1 and 2, all the reactors in Chashma that are generating electricity are under safeguards because that was the condition of supply. But the IAEA does not have the mandate to verify or interfere in the military nuclear activities of countries like Pakistan. And to conclude, the vast majority of IAEA activities in non-nuclear weapon states, including in countries like Pakistan, are developmental activities. And Pakistan is one of the biggest users of IAEA expertise in human health, cancer therapy, agriculture, developing new seeds, preventing wheat from rotting, desalination, salinity, and so on. So in that sense, the IAEA is regarded as the world's independent technical authority, both for nuclear verification and both for facilitating cooperation in civilian uses of nuclear energy.
So now let's come to the current conflict in the Middle East. How do you assess the risk of nuclear escalation or miscalculation in the region, especially considering Israel's opacity and the region's already very fragile security setup?
So, in the region of the Middle East, only Israel is not a party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And like India, Pakistan, Israel also has very limited safeguards. It only had 2 inspections last year at a research reactor in the Negev desert. But its military program is completely opaque, and Israel has never admitted having nuclear weapons, but everyone knows it may have up to 200 nuclear weapons. All other countries in the region of the Middle East are non-nuclear weapon states and have subjected their nuclear activities to IAEA verification. Iran was discovered in August of 2002 to be carrying out nuclear activities not reported to the IAEA, notably concerning enrichment of nuclear material. So the Iran nuclear file has been open since about August 2002. And Iran, for its part, has tried to cooperate, but at previous instances in time, it also engaged in not full cooperation with the IAEA.
So let's come to more technical and a bit crucial question. How does IAEA handle third-party or intelligence information shared by member states? What safeguards are in place to ensure that such information is credible, unbiased, and not politically motivated?
Use or rely on so-called third-party information or intelligence information. This started filtering into the IAEA after 1991, after Iraq had surrendered and was defeated and had to accept UN Security Council Resolution 687 of 1991, where it had to destroy its biological, chemical, and nuclear weapon related activities and ballistic missiles. So a UN Special Commission was established under the UN to do the destruction and verification of weapons of mass destruction, and the IAEA had the mandate to look at the nuclear file. And so, since Iraq was not being cooperative, intelligence information started to flow into the IAEA. And many of the people working in the UN Special Commission were people from intelligence services and military intelligence services of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. So over the years, the more and more intelligence information comes into the IAEA. So during my time, the instruction of the Director General, wrote the policy for third-party information. And the policy of the agency is that the IAEA does not actively seek intelligence information or third-party information. If any member states voluntarily wants to provide it to the IAEA will accept it, but the IAEA will not, under any circumstances, provide any feedback on this information, whether it was accurate or not. It will then include this information in the IAEA's information bank. So all countries provide information on their nuclear activity voluntarily to the IAEA, including Pakistan on a civil. They provide all the records of the nuclear operations, records of nuclear material, then the IAEA does verification, and into this is added the third-party information. One can now buy satellite imagery. You on your phone can do Google Earth and search for Natanz, any other facility that you might want to. And then the IAEA makes a determination, and if it's relevant, it follows up with the country. But this third-party information remains very controversial. Now, we have 2 other treaties. We have the Chemical Weapons Convention and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. If you want, I can give you the comparison between those 2 and the IAEA in response to the next question.
Yes, I guess you should carry on with the comparison part. Yeah.
So the Chemical Weapons Convention was agreed in 1993, and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was agreed in 1996. Now, under these 2 treaties, if one state has concerns that another state, which is a party to these treaties, is carrying out activities that are contrary to its obligations under the treaty, it provides the information to Chemical Weapons Organization in The Hague or the CTBT organization in Vienna. Then the Director General of this organization has to share this information with the Executive Council. So for these two countries, it's the Executive Council for IAEA's Board of Governors. And then, so I make an accusation against country X. So Director General of the Chemical Weapons Organization shares this information with the Executive Council, which is 41 members of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And then there is an emergency meeting. The accuser makes the case like in a court of law, and the defending country, the accused country, has an opportunity to defend itself. And then the Executive Council takes a decision about what type of inspections to carry out or sanctions. Now, given the fact that the IAEA is the original and the first international inspection organization, there is no such protection. So when the intelligence information was provided to the IAEA on Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, it came with the proviso that this information should not be shared with the country accused. And therefore, the country accused does not have the full opportunity to defend itself. And such intelligence information can be misused for confusing the IAEA or distracting the IAEA or influencing it.
All right, so you mentioned multiple times NPT. I want to ask you about the Israel's nuclear posture. Israel remains outside the NPT and is widely believed to possess nuclear weapons. How does this long-standing policy of Israel of nuclear ambiguity affect the credibility of NPT in the region?
Well, just as the NPT's credibility is not impacted in South Asia, with India and Pakistan being outside the treaty, in the Middle East too, it would be good if Israel was party to the treaty. But the more concern about the NPT in the region of the Middle East has been undeclared nuclear activities, some related to possible nuclear weapon development in Iraq, in Syria, Libya, those are the three countries besides Iran. So that has given the Middle East a sort of a bad name, that countries join the NPT and then carry out activities not reported fully to the IAEA. Since 1974, there has been a proposal on the table at the initiative of the then Shah of Iran, later joined by Egypt, to establish a zone free of nuclear weapons in the region of the Middle East. But unfortunately, the Western countries have always supported Israel in opposing the establishment of such a zone. The Israeli policy is we need to see a long-lasting peace from our Arab neighbors and recognition of Israel by all Arab countries. And then we can talk about a nuclear weapon-free zone. The Arab countries, on the other hand, have the view that if Israel were to disarm its nuclear capability, peace would follow, then recognition would come, and there could be a zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. We should not forget that Israel's nuclear weapon capability was actively assisted by countries like Norway, France, United Kingdom, and the United States. And actually, more than 300 kilograms of highly enriched uranium useful for nuclear weapons was transferred in batches from the United States to Israel in 1960. This is something that is not talked about. And many of our friends in academia and in research institutes in the US, in London, and elsewhere are completely blind to this fact or deliberately obscuring it. So we need to talk about this more. Why Israel is shielded, partly because of culpability of these countries in assisting its nuclear weapon program.
So now turning to Iran. Tehran has recently suspended its cooperation with IAEA, including surveillance and safeguard access. Based on your experience at the agency, what are the implications of such moves on international verification and efforts to build trust in the region?
Your question in context, As I mentioned, Iran's undeclared nuclear activities were discovered in August 2002. It took some years for Iran to fully admit what it was doing, but it never really acknowledged that it had a program that potentially could be used to develop nuclear weapons. So from 2002 to about 2013, Iran allowed limited verification. Then in 2013, Iran reached an agreement in Geneva with the three European countries, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, and the European Union, called the Joint Plan of Action. And then on the 14th of July, 2015, together with Russia, United States, and China, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was signed, under which Iran agreed to limit uranium enrichment to 3.67%. Nuclear power reactors like the ones in Pakistan or in Bushehr need uranium enriched to under 5% to generate electricity. To make nuclear weapons, we need to enrich uranium to more than 90%. Also, Iran agreed to limit the quantity of enriched uranium to 150 kilograms. It also agreed to limit the number of centrifuges at its enrichment facility at Natanz to 5,060, and it also had an underground facility under a mountain at Firdous, and to limit its centrifuges there to 1,044. So from 2015 to May 2018, IAEA continued to verify that Iran was fully complying with its obligations. On the other hand, the European Union and the US never really fully removed economic sanctions against Iran. Then, in the first administration of President Trump, he unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA, which had also been sort of sanctified by Security Council Resolution 2231, adopted in 2015. So Iran waited for 1 year until June 2019, and then it also slowly started to roll back the limits on enrichment, the number of centrifuges, and so on. So this latest crisis was triggered by Iran having more than 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. In my view, Iran was still far away from making a nuclear explosive device, but Iran's enemies characterized it that Iran was very close to a breakout, and for a reason which is still not fully understood, these three facilities in Iran were attacked, and Natanz and Firdous were enrichment, and Isfahan was conversion and also manufacturing of centrifuges. So to conclude this particular part, from my point of view, attacking safeguarded nuclear facilities is a violation of Article 2 of the UN Charter. It's a violation of Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention. It is a violation of many resolutions and decisions of the IAEA Board of Governors and General Conference. Nonetheless, these facilities were attacked, and Iran has now suspended cooperation, which is understandable. Although starting on Friday, Iran is resuming negotiations with France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, who are threatening Iran with the resumption of full sanctions. This is called snapback under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action expires in the middle of October 2025. So these three European countries are now squeezing Iran after the bombings to make an agreement with the United States on zero enrichment. Otherwise, they will bring back all the suspended sanctions against Iran. And they want to do this by August or September because they are worried that in October, the presidency of the Security Council goes to Russia, and that then it would be more difficult. And just as a footnote, during the month of July, the presidency of the Security Council is with Pakistan.
All right. So, talking about Iran and Israel, there is a broader asymmetry here. Iran has declared nuclear program under IAEA safeguard, while Israel remain outside the framework entirely. How do you characterize the imbalance in terms of future arms control negotiations?
So this is a very good question. So during my time, I served primarily under IAEA Director General Mohammed Al Baradei, who was from Egypt. And he has made that point in several meetings that at the time when Egypt normalized its relations with Israel after the 1973 war, recognized Israel and had the peace treaty, Egypt did not insist on denuclearization of Israel. And then recently, the so-called Abraham Accords under President Trump's first administration, where countries like the Emirates, Bahrain, I think Qatar, and one more normalized relations with Israel, they also did not insist on denuclearizing Israel's nuclear weapons. So there has been no pressure from the Arab states on denuclearization other than this diplomatic dialogue on having a nuclear weapon-free zone in the region of the Middle East. So in a sense, Israel is a free rider. There is no pressure from any source. And when countries want to bring pressure on Israel, its Western allies always protect it. Just as now, there has been no condemnation by either the IAEA Board of Governors. Only the UN Secretary General, to his credit, Mr. Guterres, has condemned the bombings. Otherwise, people have not condemned the bombings, which is in contrast to the Russian attacks on Ukrainian nuclear facilities like Zaporizhia and Chernobyl three years ago. So there is this very deep double standard that exists in international politics, and particularly in the nuclear field. And weaker countries have to suffer the consequences of these double standards, and that's what we are seeing.
Just adding to my previous question, do you think this shapes Iran's rationale for sustaining its nuclear latency or hedging strategies or approach?
Well, suspension technically is a controversial matter. I have made the point that under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which is international law governing the interpretation of international treaties and safeguards agreements between a country such as Pakistan or Iran and the IAEA are international treaties and therefore subject to interpretation under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaty. Now, since those countries that bombed Iran have said that the three facilities at Esfahan, Natanz, and Fordo have been obliterated under Article 61 of the Vienna Convention, Iran could claim that these three facilities, if they are destroyed, are no longer relevant for safeguards, and therefore there is no reason for the IAEA to come to these three facilities. And in time, maybe Iran would allow IAEA to go back to inspect the nuclear power reactor at Bushehr and the research reactor at Tehran, which produces medical isotopes for cancer therapy. So it needs to be seen. And coming back to my previous answer about the threat from the three European countries for snapback or bringing back UN sanctions, under the JCPOA, Iran also has the right to completely step out of the JCPOA and to stop all inspection activities of the IAEA under the JCPOA. So both sides have a position of leverage against each other. But Iran, unlike North Korea, which left the Non-Proliferation Treaty in January 2003 and then did its first nuclear detonation in 2006, Iran wants to be a respected member of the international community. Iran says that they are a civilization of 5,000 years. So they don't want to be a pariah country. And therefore, this is their rationale for saying, for 20 years, we've continued cooperation with the IAEA.
So some critics argue that IAEA is becoming overly politicized, particularly in high-profile cases like Iran. From your vantage point, do you believe that IAEA is sufficiently independent or empowered to maintain its technical impartiality?
That's a very good question. We need to distinguish between the Secretariat of the IAEA, which is the Director General and its staff, like me when I was in the IAEA, and then the governance structures of the IAEA, which is the Board of Governors with 35 member states, and the General Conference, which meets once a year, where all 178 member states of the IAEA meet once a year in September. So the executive arm for governance by the member state is the Board of Governors, which meets 4 times a year. And there are 35 members. And remember that the IAEA statute, like the UN Charter, goes back historically. The UN Charter was agreed in 1945. IAEA statute was agreed in 1957, but the world is very different. So in these 35 member states, 20 are Western countries or Western influenced countries. So all the resolutions censuring Iran have been passed by a vote of 19 or 20 in favor, 11 or 12 voting, abstaining to vote, 2 or 3 voting against. So the decision-making structure of the member states is distorted, and this is where the politicization occurs. So the IAEA Director General and the safeguard staff issue technical reports, but it is up to the member states and the Board of Governors to make the interpretation whether a country is in compliance or non-compliance. IAEA Secretariat does not use these words. These are words or findings of the Board of Governors. So unfortunately, because of the Iraq nuclear file, which started in 1991 after its invasion of Kuwait, the board is being increasingly polarized and politicized. And now it is completely polarized and politicized, with China and Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, some other countries on one side, Western countries on the other side, and countries like Pakistan and others are always trying to find a place in between, trying not to take sides and not alienating any of the powerful countries.
Let's go back to Iran for a bit. There has been hints from Iran that about its possible withdrawal from NPT. If that were to happen, what would be the consequences not just for the region, but for global non-proliferation regime?
We need to make the distinction that the government formally of Iran and the Foreign Ministry of Iran and the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, they have never said for the record that Iran would leave the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Statements about Iran leaving the Non-Proliferation Treaty have been made by members of the Majlis, the Iranian parliament, or others. So again, we need to make this distinction. Now, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, like other international security treaties, has a withdrawal clause. A country can leave the Non-Proliferation Treaty by giving 3 months' notice in writing to the Security Council, to the IAEA, to the UN General Assembly, stating the reasons why it is leaving and on what basis its national security interests were threatened, so that it has to withdraw from the treaty. The only country that ever did so, as I mentioned, was North Korea in January 2003. Now, Iran officially has not indicated an intention to leave the treaty. And I don't think Iran will leave the treaty. And as I mentioned, they are starting talks again with the European three on July the 25th. And before the bombing, they were engaging with the US indirectly in Oman. So I think politically there will be ramifications for the Non-Proliferation Treaty if a second country, in this case Iran, were to exit the Non-Proliferation Treaty. This would have a bad security implications for the Middle East region. It would embolden, I think, Israel more to do further attacks against Iran. And as we have seen, Iran is unable to defend itself. It is unable to have robust security of its nuclear facilities. You know, all of its arms of government, including the nuclear structure, have been completely infiltrated by foreign intelligence agents. So Iran then would be painting a target if it were to leave the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And even those countries that are supporting it, they would also withdraw their support from Iran.
So this brings me to our final question. Looking at the big picture, do you think non-nuclear non-proliferation regime is approaching towards a systemic crisis? And if so, what reforms do you believe are needed to preserve its relevance?
So this is more wishful thinking, particularly in places like India and Pakistan, that the non-proliferation treaty is about to collapse and we were right never to join it and to point out all the weaknesses and flaws. The vast majority of countries are not very happy because they joined the non-proliferation treaty to see nuclear disarmament by the five permanent members, and that is not happening. Actually, all five permanent members are modernizing their nuclear weapons. But vast majority of non-nuclear weapon states joined the non-proliferation treaty to make sure that their neighbors are not making nuclear weapons and also to benefit from cooperation in peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So all countries in the world have some uses of peaceful energy. Cancer therapy, irradiation of wheat or rice to prevent it from rotting in the storages between harvest and the time that it is sold. As I mentioned, desalination, water purification, dealing with zoonotic diseases like SARS and COVID and stuff like that. So that is the interest of most developing countries. Arms control is there, but it's not the highest interest. So I don't think the non-proliferation treaty is going to collapse. These dissatisfactions will continue. The non-proliferation treaty review conferences will continue to fail to reach agreement on agreed outcomes, and so the regime will continue. I don't see it collapsing.
So I'm concluding today's discussion here. Dr. Tariq, I thank you for your insights and your service in one of the most complex areas of global governance. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Nuclear diplomacy may not always make headlines, but its consequences ripple across borders and generations. As Middle East faces new tensions and old dilemmas, staying informed is more important than ever. Keep watching Kiosk Knowledge. Until next time, stay safe.